The math teacher made a joke about the janitor in front of the class, but when the man stepped up to the board and solved the problem better than anyone expected, it didn't just silence the room. It changed how the entire school saw him. It was fourth period on a Thursday at Lincoln High in Springfield, Illinois, a day when students checked the clock more often than they focused on the board. Mr. Carter, the calculus teacher, was known for his sharp tongue, impatience, and a steady supply of sarcasm. He wasn't particularly liked, but he wasn't disliked either. He was just a part of the scenery. The classroom felt dry, covered in equations on the whiteboard. The air had a faint scent of eraser dust and old sneakers. Phones were hidden under desks, some pretending to pay attention while others gazed out the window. Then something happened that changed the atmosphere like a sudden gust of wind. As Mr. Carter scribbled another equation on the board, a soft squeak echoed from the hallway. The janitor was nearby, mopping outside the classroom with his usual steady rhythm. Carter paused mid-sentence, glanced at the door, and smiled slightly. Without warning, he turned to the class and pointed toward the hallway. "Look who's here, Mr. Davis. Think you can solve this one?" He tapped the board with the back of his marker, almost like he was inviting a contestant to a game show. Laughter erupted, not loud, but the kind that makes you squirm in your seat as you wonder if it's appropriate. Mr. Carter smirked again. "Come on, Tom. You always look like you have something clever up your sleeve." Tom Davis, the 52-year-old janitor, stood in the hallway, mop in hand. He wore his usual dark blue uniform, clean but faded, with D. Davis stitched on his chest pocket. He didn't blink or hesitate. He simply looked into the room and slowly stepped inside. The mop leaned against the wall. A few students shifted in their seats. Some thought he might respond with a witty comeback and leave. Maybe he'd crack a joke or just walk away, but he didn't do either. Instead, Tom walked to the front of the room. "Mind if I take a crack at it?" he asked calmly, gesturing toward the board. Carter raised his eyebrows. "Be my guest." A few phones slid quietly out of backpacks. One girl whispered, "Is he for real?" But nobody stopped Tom. He picked up the marker, examined the equation, and paused, not out of hesitation, but as if he were deeply contemplating, like someone reading a familiar map. He squinted slightly, then began to write. There was no flair, no drama, just focused strokes, one line after another. The room fell into an eerie quiet. The only sounds were the marker on the whiteboard and a chair creaking as someone leaned in closer. Mr. Carter crossed his arms, watching closely. His expression didn't change, but his jaw tightened. Tom spoke the steps out loud, his voice low and patient. "This here's a chain rule problem, but the key is recognizing the inner function first. Once you isolate that, it becomes much easier." He moved as if he had done this before, not just the problem, but the teaching. His tone wasn't flashy or arrogant. He explained things plainly, as if he had spent more time teaching than cleaning. When he finished, he capped the marker and stepped back. The board was filled with accurate, organized work. He turned to Carter, then to the class. "That's one way to do it," he said. For a moment, no one moved. A junior in the back whispered, "He got it right." Mr. Carter didn't say a word, not immediately. His mouth opened slightly, but nothing came out. The silence grew louder than any joke he could have made. Tom nodded politely and walked back to the door, picked up his mop. No applause, no boasting, just quiet confidence, like he hadn't just flipped the room upside down. As Tom reached for the mop, nobody anticipated what would happen next. For a full 10 seconds, no one moved. It felt as if the class had been pulled out of a dream and dropped into something real, the kind of moment that doesn't belong in a high school classroom. Tom Davis, or Mr. Davis, as they'd always referred to him in passing, was halfway out the door when someone exclaimed, "Wait, he just did that in his head." It was Liam Parker, a senior in the front row who usually only spoke up when grades were involved. He wasn't joking. His eyes were wide. He glanced at the board again, as if the answer might have changed while he blinked. Carter finally spoke. His voice was flat, almost irritated. Well, he got the right answer, but his tone lacked the usual sarcasm. Something else had slipped in, something closer to confusion or, worse, discomfort. Tom looked back. "I spent a lot of time with numbers a long time ago," he said, then gave a small shrug. "They never left." A few students laughed, not at him this time, but because the tension was breaking. Tom didn't wait for a reply. He left, mop in, hand shoes squeaking softly down the hall as if nothing had happened, like he hadn't just solved a college-level problem in under 3 minutes without so much as a calculator. That's when the phones came out. Someone had recorded the entire thing. Sarah Mitchell, a junior, in the third row, was already editing the clip before the bell rang. In the hallway between periods, it became the only topic of conversation. "Did you see Mr. Davis? Carter's face. He looked like someone just pulled the rug out from under him. Where'd he learn all that? I thought he just cleaned floors." By lunch, the video had spread on social media. It wasn't polished, just a shaky angle of Tom's hands moving across the board while a voice in the background whispered, "Yo, he's solving it." The caption read, "Our janitor just schooled the calculus teacher." Some laughed, some stared, but the buzz kept growing. In the teacher's lounge, things weren't much quieter. "You're telling me he solved a full derivative chain problem in his head?" asked Ms. Green, the physics teacher. She was mid-bite into her sandwich, but had stopped chewing. "He did," muttered Mr. Smith, the English teacher. "Didn't use notes, didn't even pause. It was like muscle memory." Carter was at the corner table pretending to grade papers. He didn't say anything, but Principal Davis did. "He's been here 6 years. No one ever mentioned he had an academic background." People shook their heads. Nobody really knew much about Tom. He came in early, left late, and the floors were always clean. Light bulbs never burned out more than a day. The man worked in silence. But now he wasn't just the man with the mop. Back in the hallway, a group of students waited outside the janitor's closet. Not to complain about a spill or ask for a broom, they just wanted to talk to him. One kid, 12 years old, clutching his geometry book, asked, "Do you tutor Mr. Davis?" Tom blinked. "I haven't in a long time." "You should," the kid said. "That was awesome." Tom chuckled, but it didn't feel dismissive, just surprised. In third period the next day, Carter's mood was different. He didn't crack jokes. He didn't call on anyone randomly. He taught with his eyes fixed on the board, his voice more restrained than usual. Nobody said it outright, but everyone noticed. After class, Liam approached him. "Mr. Carter, that thing with Mr. Davis yesterday, he used the same method you showed us last week. The chain rule, right?" Carter nodded once. "Correct, only he explained it better." Carter didn't respond, but what truly shocked them wasn't the solution. It was what Tom said afterward. Tom Davis hadn't planned on making a scene. He never liked being the center of attention, not since he was young. So when students started waiting by the maintenance closet just to chat, or when teachers gave him long looks in the halls, he felt out of sorts. He kept his head down and went about his usual routine, refilling paper towels, fixing a leaky faucet in the boys' locker room, wiping down cafeteria tables. But he could sense it. The change. A shift in how people viewed him. Like they were trying to fit him into a new picture they hadn't known existed. It wasn't just curiosity. It was confusion, respect maybe. And it made him uneasy. That afternoon, Principal Davis asked him to stop by the office. He walked in, still wearing his gloves, his uniform a little damp from cleaning under the cafeteria sinks. He removed his cap as a sign of respect. Davis leaned forward in his chair, hands clasped. "Tom, can I ask you something? Do you have a background in education or engineering?" Tom hesitated. He looked down for a moment, like he was dusting off an old part of himself he hadn't visited in years. "I went to Illinois State," he said quietly. "Mechanical engineering, full scholarship." The principal leaned back, eyebrows raised. "Seriously? I had plans. Things got complicated." For the first time in a long while, he shared his story. He'd grown up in Peoria, Illinois. Smart kid, always loved figuring out how things worked. Motors, pulleys, anything he could take apart and rebuild. His mother, Linda, raised him and his two sisters alone. She worked overtime at a textile factory and still made time to read to them every night. She believed in education like it was the only way out. "Books first, always," she used to say. "The world will try to shut the door, but if you bring your own key, they can't stop you." Tom earned that key. Valedictorian state science, a fair winner, and then that scholarship to Illinois State. His freshman year, he was already tutoring classmates. Professors noticed his name on the attendance sheet and paid attention. But sophomore year, he received a call that changed everything. His mother collapsed at work. Doctors said it was late-stage cancer. By the time Tom got to the hospital, she could barely stay awake. "I can handle it," she whispered. "Don't come home." He didn't listen. He took a semester off, then another. He picked up jobs, warehouse work, night shifts at a grocery store, anything to pay the bills. Classes faded into the background, so did the dream. By the time his mother passed, everything was scattered. He had no home to return to, no money to finish his degree, and no guidance counselor calling to ask why he hadn't come back. "I kept thinking I'd get back to school," Tom told Davis. "But one thing turned into another. Life doesn't wait for you." The principal sat in silence. The story was heavy, not dramatic, just real. The kind of life you never hear unless you ask. Back at home, Tom kept his transcripts in a box under his bed, along with a worn Illinois State sweatshirt, an old calculator, and a photo of him and his mom on orientation day. He never touched it, but never threw it away. Now all of it was being dragged into the light again. That evening, he sat on the back steps of his small apartment. Complex. The sky was dim, the kind of quiet where the only sound was the hum of distant traffic. He sipped tea from a metal thermos and stared ahead. He hadn't thought about calculus in years, not since that last tutoring gig he picked up before dropping out. And now, here it was again, like an old friend knocking on his door. But one decision had derailed everything he had worked so hard for. Back in college, Tom had made a promise to himself: take a short break, get his family back on track, then finish strong. But life didn't bend to plans, especially not the kind built on hope alone. After his mother passed, Tom returned to Peoria, trying to piece things together. His sisters were still in high school, barely getting by. Bills piled up on the counter. The landlord wanted rent, and no one from Illinois State called to ask where he'd gone. He took whatever jobs he could find: stockroom loader, janitor at a strip mall, overnight security at a shipping yard, anything that paid enough to keep the lights on. School drifted further and further into the rear view. At first he called the university now and then, asking about reapplying, transferring credits. They'd send forms, he'd fill them out, but he never mailed them. Something always got in the way. Then came the breaking point. It was late November when a man named Frank Williams, who owned a flooring company in St. Louis, offered Tom steady work. "You're sharp," he said. "Don't waste your time pushing brooms. I'll train you myself." Tom felt hopeful again, a real shot. But the day before he was supposed to start, his youngest sister, Mia, was caught in a fight at school, a silly argument that escalated. She had broken someone's nose, and they threatened to expel her. Tom had to be there. No one else would show up for her. So he missed his first day at the flooring job. Frank gave the spot to someone else, and that was it. A door that could have opened slammed shut. He stopped chasing dreams after that, started chasing stability. Years blurred together, town to town, job to job. He never had a record, never got into trouble. He just survived quietly. By the time he arrived in Springfield in his early 40s, he wasn't looking for a new beginning, just a steady paycheck. The school district offered benefits. Summers were quiet. He took the janitor position without a second thought. He liked it in his own way. Predictable, clean work. Students left him alone. Teachers smiled politely. He didn't expect friendship or connection. He didn't need it. He kept his head down, cleaned up messes, and vanished before the last bell rang. But numbers never left him. Sometimes, when he passed a math classroom, he'd glance at the board, see a formula, and finish it in his head. It was like muscle memory, a part of him that stayed sharp even when everything else got buried under routine. He'd go home, make himself a simple dinner, grilled chicken, brown rice, maybe some broccoli, and flip through an old engineering book he kept hidden behind the cereal boxes just to see if he still had it. He always did. He just never had a reason to show it until Mr. Carter called him out that day. And now things were shifting, not just at school, but within him. He thought about the kids who waited outside his supply closet with questions. He thought about Liam Parker stopping by that morning with a folded piece of paper and saying, "Mr. Davis, I tried to solve that same problem. Can you check it for me?" And Tom had gently, carefully explained where Liam had gone wrong without making him feel foolish. Liam smiled when he finally understood, not just out of pride, but out of connection. That kind of thing stayed with you, but not everyone was thrilled. Carter, for one, had gone quiet, too quiet. Students noticed, teachers noticed, something about being outshone in front of your class by a man you never thought twice about rattled him. He didn't lash out, but his tone got sharper, his patience thinner. And when someone mentioned Tom in the lounge, he changed the subject. He wasn't used to being overshadowed, especially not by someone who'd been invisible to him until now. But life had one more twist waiting, and this one brought him right back to math. The video didn't just circulate around Lincoln High. It made its way out. It started small. A local student page reposted it with the caption, "When your janitor turns out to be smarter than your teacher." Then it landed on a regional education forum. By the weekend, it had crossed state lines. People online couldn't believe it. They weren't mocking Tom, they were in awe. "Dude broke it down cleaner than my college professor. Someone get this man a classroom and a chalkboard, not a mop." Proof you never know someone's story. By Monday morning, Tom had no idea any of this was happening. He didn't follow social media, he still had a flip phone. When he arrived at work, the first thing he did was fix a jammed paper towel dispenser in the girls' restroom, just like he always did on Mondays. But something felt different. Teachers paused their conversations when he walked by. Students nodded, not out of obligation, but with a strange kind of respect. A few even smiled, as if they were seeing him for the first time. "Hey, Mr. Davis," one girl called out as he walked past the library. "You're kind of famous now?" Tom chuckled softly. "Don't believe everything you see." But when he turned the corner, Liam Parker was waiting there with two other students. One had a calculus book in his hands, open to a problem highlighted in blue. "Would you mind going through this with us?" Liam asked. Tom looked around, bewildered. "You got a free period?" "We made time." And just like that, in the middle of a hallway lined with lockers and science fair posters, Tom sat down on the floor with three teenagers and walked them through a complex equation, step by step, line by line, not talking at them, talking with them. It wasn't loud, it wasn't flashy, but something meaningful was happening. Down the hall, someone filmed it. No one told Tom. He wouldn't have liked that. Back in the office, Principal Davis was on the phone with someone from the local school. Bored. "Yes, that's correct. Tom Davis. Been with us 6 years. No, he's not faculty, he's a janitor." He paused, listening. Well, I wouldn't call it unorthodox. I'd call it overlooked. Meanwhile, in the teacher's lounge, Carter was reading an email forwarded by a parent, a link to the now viral video. No commentary, no subject line, just the link and the phrase, "Thought you'd want to see this." He closed the laptop without watching it. That afternoon, Davis called Tom back in and offered him a seat. Tom stayed standing. "I've got a request from the board," the principal said. "They want to know if you'd be interested in running an after-school tutoring program. Small group, voluntary, just a trial run." Tom didn't respond immediately. "You'd be paid, of course," Davis added. "It's not about replacing your current role, just adding to it, sharing what you clearly still have." Tom looked down at his hands, calloused, clean, worn. "I haven't taught in a long time," he said. "You haven't stopped knowing," Davis replied. Tom looked up. There was no pressure in the man's voice, just a simple invitation. "I'll think about it." That night, he pulled the old cardboard box out from under his bed, the one with the Illinois State sweatshirt, the transcripts, the picture he hadn't touched in years. He laid everything out on the table. The paper had yellowed a little, the edges curled, but the words were still there. That was the thing about knowledge. It didn't fade. It waited. He didn't need to go viral, didn't care about the views or the comments. But knowing he could still make a difference, that tugged at something. While some were amazed, others weren't so thrilled by his rising attention. The more attention Tom received, the more the school began to shift. It started with the kids. They were the first to change. The ones who used to walk past him in the hall without a second thought now stopped to say hi. A few even asked for help on homework between classes. By the end of the second week, a small group of students had unofficially formed what they called Davis sessions. They'd meet in the library after school, notebooks open, heads bent, listening as Tom explained concepts with clarity no one expected, but everyone respected. Then came the teachers. Most were supportive. Ms. Green from physics was the first to swing by the library and observe him working with the students. "You've got a gift," she said softly. "And I don't mean just with numbers." But not everyone was thrilled. Mr. Carter hadn't said a word about Tom since the day it all happened. In the teacher's lounge, he acted as if nothing had changed, but the bitterness was clear in his silences. He spoke in short sentences, never looked Tom in the eye, never mentioned calculus. When a parent-teacher meeting brought up Tom's growing influence with the students, Carter said, "It's good they're interested in math. Let's just make sure we don't blur the line between instruction and inspiration." It sounded polite on the surface, but the tone behind it, everyone heard it. The principal didn't let it slide. He brought Carter into his office one morning and laid it out plainly. "I know it stung," Davis said, "but Tom didn't embarrass you. He inspired them." Carter shifted in his seat. "He's not qualified. He's educated more than we realized," Davis countered. "And more importantly, he's reaching kids in a way none of us have." Carter opened his mouth, then closed it. There was nothing to say. Not really. Meanwhile, Tom kept to his routine. He didn't ask for a title, didn't want special treatment. But when the principal offered him a modest stipend to keep the tutoring sessions going, he accepted, not for the money, but because it felt right. He started carrying a small binder with him. Inside were pages of problems, blank worksheets, notes he'd written by hand. During breaks, he'd sit in the back corner of the cafeteria and scribble down formulas from memory, occasionally nodding at a passing student who'd call out, "Hey, Mr. D." One afternoon, Sarah, the student who filmed the original clip, stopped him by the vending machines. "Did you ever want to be a teacher?" she asked. Tom took a moment before responding. "I wanted to build things, teach later maybe, but life had different ideas." "Well," she said, handing him a fresh mechanical pencil, "I think you're doing both now." He smiled. Thank you. But behind all this good, there was tension brewing. Some parents had started calling the school. Most were supportive, but one anonymous complaint hit the board. Is it appropriate for a janitor to tutor students in a school setting? Is he certified? Has he been background checked for instruction? Davis handled it quickly. He's an employee of the district. He's done nothing wrong, and if concern was genuinely the motive, they'd have spoken with me directly. He never told Tom about the complaint, but still, Tom could feel something in the air. Not resentment, but resistance. Like some folks didn't know how to place him now that he didn't fit neatly into the background. Then one afternoon, Carter did something no one expected. He walked into the library during one of Tom's tutoring sessions and quietly observed from a distance as Tom explained integrals to a group of 4 students. After about 10 minutes, he stepped forward. "You mind if I sit in?" Carter asked. Tom looked up. His expression didn't change. He nodded toward the chair. "As long as you don't mind learning something." The students laughed, just enough to lighten the moment. Carter smirked. For once, it wasn't mean. They sat together that day, said little, but it was a start. But Tom wasn't interested in titles. He had something else in mind. It wasn't about proving anything anymore. For Tom Davis, standing at the whiteboard in the library with students gathered around, it was never about redemption or revenge. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He wasn't trying to be remembered. He was just showing up for them, the kids. The ones who reminded him of the boy he used to be. Every Tuesday and Thursday, right after the final bell, that corner of the library filled with chatter, questions, scribbled notes, and wide eyes as Tom walked students through math problems. They once feared, not because he had all the answers, but because he made them believe they could find those answers themselves. That's what stuck. There was Ethan, the freshman who nearly failed algebra last semester, now solving quadratic equations without looking panicked. And Sarah, who used to hate math, now leading mini-sessions on weekends for her younger siblings using Tom's notes. He never stood at the front like a traditional teacher. He sat beside them, talked with them, asked them questions before answering theirs. Gradually, more teachers started dropping by, not to supervise, just to learn how he was doing it. Ms. Green asked if she could adopt some of his explanations for her class. Coach Rivera asked if Tom would help set up a summer prep group for incoming freshmen. Even Carter, hesitant, prideful Carter, stopped by regularly. Not every day, but often enough that he quietly offered an extra problem or two, and eventually began offering words of encouragement to the kids. The edge in his voice had dulled. Something in him had softened. One day, during a tutoring session, Carter lingered after the students left. "You know," he said, looking at the board, "I used to think this job made me important. Teaching gave me power." Tom didn't interrupt. "But you've reminded me what it's really about. Showing up, making it count." Tom just nodded. "We all lose our way sometimes." He didn't hold grudges. He didn't need to. Principal Davis called him in again a month later. There was a proposal on the table to formalize his sessions into an elective class next semester. Not for credit, but enrichment. A bridge between students and their own confidence. "We'll have to jump through some hoops," Davis warned. "But if you're willing," Tom shook his head gently. "I appreciate it," he said, "but I don't need the title. I'd rather keep it simple. Let the kids come because they want to, not because it's on a schedule." Davis nodded. "Then we'll support you however we can." Word spread beyond the school district. A local reporter stopped by to interview him. Tom kept it brief. No dramatic story, no self-promotion. "I'm just showing them what they already have inside," he said. "Sometimes it takes a little time to see it." In the spring, Lincoln High hosted its annual student showcase. There were science projects, art displays, choir performances, and in one corner of the gym, a booth titled Davis's Corner displayed student-written reflections on math, life, and confidence. Dozens of students had written about how Tom helped them see more in themselves, not because he gave them answers, but because he listened and believed. By the end of the night, people weren't asking, "Is he the janitor?" anymore. They were saying, "That's Mr. Davis." He didn't wear a suit, he didn't deliver a speech. He stood by the table, smiled, and thanked the students who came by. Later that evening, back at his apartment, he pulled out the old Illinois State sweatshirt from the box under his bed. He didn't put it on. He folded it neatly, placed it in a new storage bin, and added a folder filled with student thank you notes beside it. Legacy, he realized, isn't about titles, it's about what you leave behind in others. He didn't need to finish school to teach. He didn't need a degree to lead. He just needed to show up every day and care, and that's exactly what he planned to keep doing.